Hello, my name is William, and my group members are Mia, Emma, and Rainy. This is our group presentation about Integrated Studio 1, Assignment 1, Emergency Response Visual Report. I will introduce the geographical environment of these areas and the issue it brings. The Belgo community is located within the jurisdiction of Whole Creek County in the Kimberley regions of Western Australia, formerly known as the Belgo Hills and the Belgo Missions. This community is connecting to the Great Sandy Desert and the Tanami Desert, established by German missionaries in 1939. According to the 2021 census, the population of Belgo is 430. Belgo belong to a remote community. Many common risks and challenges in remote areas current here. This includes social issues, environmental issues, healthcare service, cultural protection, and infrastructure challenge. According to the map, there are no river and forests around the community. There is a vast plain consisting of the mountains and plains around here. This is close to the desert with sparse vegetation. There is a private supermarket in here, but there is no hospital, only a health center established by volunteer organization. Surprisingly, Belgo has its own airport. The Belgo climate condition is harsh, with a tropical grassland climate. The climate is characterized by high temperature throughout the years, with temperature rising up to 45 degrees Celsius in summer, brief coolness in winter, strong easterly winds blowing from the deserts, and temperature dropping to 5 degrees Celsius at night. The precipitation is less than 1 millimeter. Therefore, drought and insufficient water resources often occur in the regions, which is not conducive to local food cultivation. Most of their food sources come from food transport over long distances from other areas. According to Peter Kine, the manager of the local private supermarket, most of the store's inventory comes from Darwin, which has a journey of nearly 1,500 kilometers and is one of the least livable roads in Australia, next the animal and plant. The plant species in these areas are mainly desert vegetation with low water content. The local plants have adapted to the harsh drought condition and can survive tenaciously during prolonged dry seasons. The local large wild animals are mainly horse, camel, and kangaroos. Due to the high local transportation costs, food is scarce. Therefore, local people often need to hunt wild animals. For example, when hunting kangaroos, local people will cook them in the wild and let their children to share their foods. Feeding a group of the hungry children is a Dorsey auntie's daily experience. This is how we take your children out. We share what we killed. They hunt with their children and guide them on how to get the food through hunting. However, according to Simon's report, hunting is an inherently violent and destructive act. When children learn to hunt in childhood, they also learn how to deal with violence and destruction. This has led to a long history of violence in Belgo. At the same time, social problem is remote areas have always been the danger and challenge in Belgo. According to the Belgo 2021 census, residents in the regions generally face a saturation of low income, low education level, and high employment rate, where multiple clans live together. According to the ABC historical information, since 2013, local violence has continued to ferment, and many people support and use violence to solve problems. They harm family and children to vent the anger in their heart. Local human violence continues, and local violence against women and children persists. This is the main geographical environment and social issues of Belgo. Now hand out to Mia to introduce the culture of Belgo.
When it comes to the culture and values in Belgo, the first concept I have to bring up is dreaming, a social group in most Western desert languages. According to Stanner, Aborigines use the term dreaming to refer to their totems, totem sites, and the time of marvels in the indefinitely remote past. In the Bargo area, Dreams are where transformations and metamorphoses take place, and where ancient knowledge is revealed. Subsequently, their entire ritual, including their ritual sequence, arts, design, and sacred objects, are all affected and even based on the dreaming of the people. One of the most extensive ritual comprises is Yabuyu, which is a main genre of regional songs and dances for women across the Central Australian region. It has strong relation to women's patrilineal identity and their connection to the country through their patrilineal family, and is performed to maintain the well-being of the group and of the land. Charada is another ritual performed a lot by women of Bago, and is also called the love magic. And according to Bell, it includes not only love and sex, but also the sweep of emotions and tensions engendered by male-female relationships. When we're designing for the Bargo groups, it's important to consider the difference in Aboriginal culture. That's their connection to the land or the world, and their nomadic essence. For Aborigines, their relatedness and relationality may include the places, country, ancestral realm, animals, plants, and their kin. In Bago, kinship is seen as an important part of the social network. People ensure that they maintain their kinship ties by remaining mobile, participating in rituals, and caring for relatives so that they do not be socially dead. However, in such a small rural area, the emphasis on kinship may also lead people, especially vulnerable groups, to choose to remain silent about persecution. According to Hunter, Smith, and Walsh, the closer the relationship between victim and assailant, the less likely the woman is to report the crime. Another reason for this is because of the complexity of social networks in small communities, where the persecuted often lack anonymity. Another important concept when we discuss Aboriginal culture is cultural resistance. Cultural resistance in the colonial context has largely influenced indigenous values. The Ishtar chronicles how Bargo people in the 1990s differentiated themselves from white by being mixed. She mentioned that she had witnessed a resident deliberately throwing orange peels onto an area that had just been swept by cartilla staff, and believed that the mess is a statement of resistance to white hegemony. On the other hand, there is a faith-based resistance to white culture, and in Moore's observation of the local population of Bargo in 1975, it was found that there was a certain fear of the mission because their rituals were perceived to be in contradiction to Christianity. There is fear of some kind of retribution from the mission for the learning of the ritual believed to empower Aborigines to the point of equality within white law. This is also reflects on the political environment in Bago. They refuse the political structure on local councils and to maintain their own social, cultural, and ritual agendas, their own decision-making forms, and a sociality constructed around kinship networks, rights, and responsibilities. They refuse to adopt the political structure and local councils in its entirety, refuse to commit themselves to the fundamentals of community management and accountability, and cared more about rituals, which they also called business, than they did about the management of their communities. The divide between indigenous resistance and defiance to modernist values and the arrogance of white society's unwillingness to understand indigenous culture will be something to focus on in the subsequent design process.
We have identified several dangerous factors that might lead to emergencies in the community of Balgo. There is a significant alcohol abuse issue for Indigenous Australians. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, 50% of the Indigenous Australians reported drinking alcohol at levels exceeding the risk guideline. Alcoholism could affect people's judgment, making people more impulsive and leading to violent tendencies. Remote Indigenous communities often have limited education access. In Balgo, only one school exists for the entire community. The school offers education up until Year 10. There is no school in the area that offers classes for Year 11 and 12. In addition, the attendance rate at school is appallingly low, only 17% for Year 10 students. In the school curriculum, there is no reference to any sex education content, which is another concerning factor contributing to sexual misconduct in the area. The male-dominated society in the indigenous communities raised concerns for gender equality. Young men consider sex as a form of manhood and power, which is a worrying sign for sexual abuse. Some potential ongoing human rights emergencies are identified for Balgo. Racism against Indigenous Australians have been a problem for decades. The study indicates that sexual violence incidents are rarely reported by Indigenous women, as they feel that police usually don't take crimes relating to Indigenous people seriously. Due to national policies based on racial discrimination, such as the Stolen Generation, Indigenous people who were forced to leave their land and practice white or Western culture have developed generational traumas, including PTSDs. Such mental health issues are related to difficulties in forming intimate relationships and developing violent tendencies. In addition, Indigenous people who have lost their native culture due to the white Australian policy no longer knows how to create a healthy bond with their children according to their traditions. Systemic racism also influences government policies in relation to the Aboriginal people. The government for decades have been neglecting the problem in the remote Indigenous areas. There is also little research and knowledge in Indigenous people. Therefore, the policies can't be effective and useful. An Australian Institute of Family Study report shows that poverty is an important factor relating to high violence rate, especially in domestic settings. The median income for Indigenous households for Balgo is $356 per week, compared to $959 per week Australia-wide. In terms of chronic issues in the community, domestic and sexual violence are the ones this group is focusing on. These could also lead to severe mental health problems in the community. According to ABC News, an 11-year-old Indigenous girl took her own life due to sexual abuse. The suicide rate for Indigenous Australians is more than twice as high as for non-Indigenous Australians, as shown on the left. On top of that, the Indigenous region Balgo is in has the highest Indigenous women suicide rate, as shown being the darkest color on the map.
Starting with the statistic from the 2023 surveys on domestic violence, an estimated 3.8 million Australian adults have experienced physical or sexual domestic violence. Notably, the Indicus regional reports double the rate of sexual assault compared to non-Indicus areas. Moving on to the theoretical framework utilized in address domestic violence, a report from the University of New South Wales showed a commonly approaches in Australian communities. Different communities and organizations may choose distinct methods and theoretical framework based on the specific circumstances and needs. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence encourage and advocate for the protection of women's rights through education, awareness, legislation funding, and increased volunteer surveys. The Australian government emphasized the need to describe rural characteristics currently focus on population and geographical features, economy and occupational dimensions. Like an indigenous company and charity aim to enhance cultural identity among young people. They particularly support the women of Bargon community, organizing cultural experience events in indigenous area, open especially to female visitors, and encourage their activities participation in ancient ritual. The Growing Up Strong Girl initiative designed for 9 to 14 years old girls and their mothers offer 60 cultural experience. The program ensures that future generations excel in dance, song, therapy, and knowledge of jungle medicines. Participants undergo their own life ritual through the local growing up method, enjoying their culture. While the activity is transfer-free, the for-profit contributes to the development of the indigenous area and propagate indigenous culture to the younger generation, ensure the well-being of elders in this area. Activity promotion on Instagram and Facebook have effectively increased social attention to the local culture. However, limitation exists due to the limitation local transportation hindering the growing of local tourism. Case 2 involve a program by Lhasa University rolling volunteers to participate in Aboriginal communities' life in Bargo. Bargo faces challenges such as lack of job opportunities and recreational activities from young and adults, resulting in substance abuse, domestic violence, and teenager pregnancy. In response, volunteers from the Lhasa Order need to build a relationship with indigenous youths and families, providing life assistance to enrich their leisure time and spiritual worlds. The Center of Women's Safety and Well-being collaborates with government, top institutions, public, community, and private organizations to ensure women's rights, prevent violence against women, promote women's health, and foster gender equality. Ruxin Indigenous Design has crafted logo for this organization. Her design known for cultural significance. In response to the call to protect women's rights, the organization has developed a strategic plan and promotes the idea through brochures. And the website contains information about domestic violence service in various Western Australia communities, aiding women in finding the right service at the right time. Last, the Purple Benches project instills a series of purple benches in public places to commemorate victims of domestic violence. Currently not collecting funds, the project serves as a call for attention and organization support, with specific donation service available on the website. In summary, all the three cases aim to attract social attention through activities.
We want to propose a few design solutions learned from the case studies in response to our identified problems. For potential danger of alcohol abuse, limited education opportunities, and male-dominant society, we consider cartoon picture books, addressing cultural issues and promoting healthier attitude towards alcohol consumption. Features elements of indigenous dreaming beliefs to respect their ways of learning and accepting new ideas. The picture books could be for kids and teenagers, helping them develop a healthy view of intimate relationships. As for emerging and ongoing issue of racism and poverty, we believe that tourism and cultural exchange activities are the solutions. We can promote a two-way tourism for Balgo. First, having visitors to Balgo helps Australians understand and learn more about the local indigenous culture, and it also increased the local revenue through tourism. Then, setting up events and activities with other cities in Australia, inviting the community of Balgo to perform their traditional ceremonies, giving Australians who live in big cities more exposure to the Aboriginal culture, and eliminating cultural barriers to decrease racism. In terms of chronic issue of sexual violence, we could design an emergency guideline booklet. This first aid booklet could be distributed to the entire community, illustrating action steps for people who face sexual assault or domestic violence, which could be in the form of a diagram, as shown here. This provides victims with a guideline of what to do and where to get help. The booklet could also include resources available to them, including counseling, group support, and other organizations. This is our reference list. And thank you for listening.